Hang tight.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening. Today is September 18th, 2024, and I'd like to call to order the special meeting for the City of Baldwin Park. City Clerk, roll call.
Absolutely, Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem, excuse me, Mayor Estrada. Let the record reflect that Mayor Estrada is not present. Mayor Pro Tem Ayala,
Here.
Councilmember Avila, Councilmember Garcia. Let the record reflect that Councilmember Garcia is not present. Councilmember Damian.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Clerk. I'd like to move towards public communication. City Clerk, is there anybody wishing to speak?
No, Mayor Pro Tem, at this time, we have not received requests for comment.
Thank you. There's anybody here in the audience that would like to address the council? Okay, seeing no interest, we'll move forward. We have an open session. We have a study session, a presentation on the transit study update presented by our Director of Public Works, Sam Gutierrez, and Evan Brooks and Associates. So Sam, when you're ready, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So just a brief background, back in March of this year, the City Council approved an extension to our current transit operations contract with Southland Transit. At the same time, the council authorized staff to commission a transit study so that we can take a deep look into our transit operations. We have completed the study report that is in draft form. And so tonight we're going to give you a presentation of the existing conditions, the findings, and some recommendations. We will take your questions and comments and then incorporate those into the final report. And then at the next council meeting, we'll have a final report for you to review. So with that, I would like to ask, well, first, let me introduce the team. The city's transit team is Lena Abdullah and David Lopez. They're here to answer questions. Our presenter tonight, who's a consultant with Evan Brooks and Associates, Martin Gombert, who has a wealth of experience in transit. And then Jason Snow, the transit operator with STI, is on Zoom. So with that, Martin, take it away.
Good evening, honorable council members and staff. As Mr. Gutierrez said, my name is Martin Gombert. I'm a transportation consultant working with Evan Brooks and Associates on the Baldwin Park Transit Study. It's a pleasure to be here. And just as a point of reference, I've lived in the San Gabriel Valley for almost my whole life, and I grew up down the street next to Queen of the Valley Hospital. So know the city very well as growing up in West Covina. I'm going to walk you through the
Oh, there you go. Sorry, you're too tall.
I need to be shorter.
Oh, there you are. Thought the mic was on.
I'm going to walk you through the presentation, questions, comments as we go, and we'll incorporate, as Sam said, any of these comments and questions in the final report that will be presented. Next slide, please. So a brief overview of the study. First thing we did was collect Baldwin Park transit data, which there was plenty of from city staff and also field work that we did. We held a transit summit in July at the Senior Center to gather community input. We had members of city staff there. We had members of the contractor, Southland Transit. We also had the executive director of Access Services, and we had assembly member, one of the assembly members' staff also attended. So we had very good attendance. We talked to staff and community leaders, applied best practices, and to develop a recommendation to increase transit ridership and make transit service relevant. And that's going to be one of my key points of this. Next slide, please. So Baldwin Park Transit Service was started over 30 years ago. That kind of ties in with the Metrolink station opening in 1993. The service started back in 93. CNG buses have been in operation since 2008, and they're still in service. 2 routes serve the city, the Teal and the Pumpkin route, which are basically one route running clockwise and counterclockwise. And the 3rd route is the express route, started in 2019, which provides service between the Metrolink station and the Kaiser facility in Baldwin Park. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about existing conditions. Transit ridership in the past 9 years has dropped by over 50%. This mirrors what's happened in Southern California in transit. And we'll talk about, there's one big reason why that's happened. You can see back in 2016, the system was transporting approximately 139,000 passengers annually. And last year, and the last data that we have is 23, was just a little bit over 55,000 annually. So pretty big drop of over 50%. Next slide, please. One of the things we look at is passenger per hour productivity. In other words, how efficient is the service being operated? And it's simply dividing the number of folks that ride the bus per hour. And you can see back in this compares other cities in the community. So right now, the Baldwin Park service is carrying a little over 3 passengers per hour. So every hour a bus is rattling around the city, 3 people are getting on or off. Foothill Transit, which is the largest provider of public transit service in the city, they're doing about 9 passengers per hour. So is the city of El Monte. And I'll talk about El Monte in a little bit because the demographics between Baldwin Park and El Monte are very similar. El Monte is transporting about 3 times as many folks on their service as Baldwin Park. Next slide. Talking about existing conditions, last year, the average cost per passenger every time somebody got on a Baldwin Park bus was approximately $27 per hour. That's the cost to the contractor, that's fuel, that's city staff's time. What's striking is when you look at the Teal and Pumpkin route, you're looking at about $22 per hour per passenger. The express route, you're looking at over $70 per passenger. So again, it's something we'll address later on in the study. Next slide, please. So just kind of summarizing existing conditions for the fixed route service, 57% drop in fixed route ridership in the past 8 years, 63% drop in passenger per hour productivity. And when we talk about cost per passenger, there's been an over 300% increase in cost per passengers in 8 years. And that's a combination of your contracting costs are going up and your ridership has dropped significantly. Productivity in El Monte, city with similar demographics, is 3 times higher than Baldwin Park. We'll talk in the recommendations. There has been very little or no marketing done for this service. That's started to turn around, but very little has been done. Service quality is good. I've ridden the buses. We've had folks that do mystery rides that get on the buses and ride both the dial ride and fixed route. Buses are clean, polite operators, no safety issues noted. So the quality of service out there is very good. And a thing I'll talk about toward the end is the city has 3 to 4 years to improve ridership before the rules from the California Air Resources Board kick in, where you have to operate zero emission vehicles. That will require a new fleet and expensive infrastructure. So I'll talk about that a little bit farther when we get into some of this. Next slide, please. So talking about your dial ride service for the senior and disabled individuals, ridership topped out in 2016 at approximately 17,000 per year. As a lot of services, that dropped significantly during the pandemic period. That started to pick up again. And in FY23, it was approximately 7,900 annually. But again, a pretty big drop from 2016. Next slide, please. So this slide, I call it rides per seniors. This is simply dividing the number of rides seniors make by the number of seniors in the community. This tells you how much your seniors are using this service. And Baldwin Park's about average. Seniors take a little under one ride per year. That's all seniors in the community. That's higher than West Covina and higher than Glendale. It's about par with the city of El Monte, but a little bit lower than Alhambra. Next, please. And again, going back to the cost per passenger in 2016, it was approximately $17 every time a senior got on a dial-a-ride bus. And in FY23, it was around $43 per passenger. Now that cost has gone up quite a bit, but I'll show you a little bit later how that compares with some other cities. Next slide. So as I've mentioned, 54% dial-a-ride ridership drop in 8 years. Service is lightly utilized by seniors. Little or no marketing for the service. And 153% increase in cost per passengers in 8 years. I will mention that contracting costs have gone up significantly in the past 5 years, and that's primarily due to increased wages for bus operators. And Metro's seen that, Foothill has seen that, and the contract operators have seen that as well. Next slide. So the goals that we're presenting to the council are doubling fixed route ridership in 3 years, increase dial-a-ride ridership by 25% in 3 years, replace some unproductive fixed route service with microtransit service, and initiate the Go Pass program to generate up to 50,000 annual student rides. That's a Metro program that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Next, please. So how would we achieve these goals? And again, I'll get into these details, but replace the express route with microtransit service that serves Metrolink riders. Adjust routes to serve Olive Middle School. Potentially replace weekend fixed route service with microtransit, and of course, update marketing efforts. So those would be 4 of our big items. Next slide. And again, provide an app for dial-a-ride users. There is an app that fixed route riders can use right now to see real-time information on the buses. But what I've noticed in the last 5 or 10 years is that when you get a new group of seniors, they're more comfortable using technology than maybe some of the older folks in the community. So bringing an app for the dial-a-ride users would be something relatively easy to do. Install bike racks on all the buses. You see those on both Metro and Foothill buses. Relatively small expense. And the bike racks really help with that first last mile issue. Reduce and modify fares, which we'll talk about. The fares on both the dial-a-ride and fixed route service are pretty high compared to neighboring cities. And start the Go Pass program with Metro that would allow all Baldwin Park students to ride buses for free. So let's get into these details a little bit. Talk a little bit about Metro's Go Pass program. It allows K through 12 and community college students to ride transit for free. So if Baldwin Park Unified School District participated in this program, every single student would get a bus pass, a tap card that would allow them to ride Baldwin Park Transit, Foothill Transit, and Metro for free. Metro estimates that you would have 56,000 students would ride transit annually. Now, all of those rides wouldn't be on Baldwin Park Transit, but quite a few would be. Estimated cost is $69,000 annually. And that can be funded by the school district with participation from the state, because the state will kick in for transportation funding. And depending on the policy decision of the city of Almonte, that is also an eligible use of local return funds. So the GoPass benefits from considerable marketing efforts from Metro. Everything is done online. Probably have some students already using transit, but this would make a huge difference in kind of turbocharging that. Next, and by the way, we did make a presentation with city staff. Metro made a presentation to city staff and Baldwin Park Unified School District, I think about 6 weeks ago. This was very well received by Baldwin Park Unified School District staff. So they have been part of this process. Another recommendation would be to start microtransit service. And if we could go to the next slide. So you've probably seen microtransit in some neighboring communities, and probably the best example is Metro Micro, which is operating in Almonte. It's demand response service using small vehicles. Customers order service through an app, or if they don't have a smartphone, it's a call center. Flexible routing and scheduling of small vehicles that are shared with other passengers. It's basically a modern version of dial-a-ride service for the general public, but with a pretty strong technological overlay. And it's a creative option to provide transit service in low-use areas. And where I'll talk about that in a little bit is both the express route service to Metrolink, and we also think running this type of service on the weekends instead of the big buses. And if we can go backwards. So the proposal would be to replace unproductive express route service with microtransit service to serve Metrolink commuters. And I don't know if Metrolink has publicized this or not, but next month there's going to be a significant expansion of Metrolink service on the San Bernardino line. Starting next month, you're going to have hourly service on Metrolink during the weekdays between Union Station and Covina. So the purpose here is to try to convert Metrolink into a regional rail service more than a commuter rail service. So the proposed replacement of the express route with microtransit service would allow folks that are working in Baldwin Park, not just at Kaiser, but in other areas, to be met by the microtransit service to be dropped off to their employers and then reverse that in the afternoon. So right now the express route is doing 20 folks a day. So basically they're taking 7 or 8 people to Kaiser in the morning and bringing them back, which is not very productive for a big bus, but this proposal would open up the commuting service for Metrolink passengers that work in Baldwin Park. Service change would be revenue neutral, or expense neutral, excuse me. New vehicles would be required to run this service, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more detail in the final report. And if we could jump ahead 2 slides. As I've talked about, Market Baldwin Park Transit Service. Right now, there is information online. There is a real-time app that you can use if you're using the service. What was noted in we did a transit survey after the transit summit. People did note that transit information was hard to find. So the proposal is to develop a robust set of marketing materials for both digital and physical distribution. Recommended materials include bilingual bus riders guides, dial-a-ride brochures, updated city website, and if the city moves forward, a microtransit service guide. This isn't a large expense, but again, you've got to have bus schedules, you've got to have maps, because you do have some people that just like that in a physical product, as well as both digital. Next slide. So a big recommendation too is modify and reduce fares. As I'll show you in a slide in a minute, the fixed route and dial-a-ride fares are high compared to other transit systems in the San Gabriel Valley. Recommended to reduce the fixed route fare from $1 to 50 cents. And if you think about it, if you're low income and you want to ride the bus for 5 blocks, you may think, I'll save the dollar. Also proposed to allow senior disabled residents to ride all services for free, both the dial-a-ride and fixed route. The fares that you collect on the dial-a-ride, I want to say, are $7,000 per year, so it's not significant. And we think that this could have a considerable impact on, especially on some of your lower income seniors. Last fare recommendation would be to participate in Access Services Free Fare Program. That would allow any disabled folks that use Access Service to ride Baldwin Park service for free. And Access reimburses you for those fares. So that's a expense neutral option. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is that the impact of CARB rules on Baldwin Park Transit service. So right now, the service is carrying about 250 people a day, and a smaller number on weekends. You're going to be faced in the next several years. Your existing transit fleet will need to be replaced in 3 to 4 years. The CARB Innovative Clean Transit Rule requires new vehicles to be zero emissions starting in 2029. Conservatively, zero emission vehicles are 1.2 million plus. And I'm not including infrastructure costs. So if you're looking at battery electrics, you're looking at some pretty robust charging systems. If you go the fuel cell route, that's totally other expense. So the city is facing a very large cost in the near future to replace buses that are very lightly used. And I think there's a narrow window of the next couple of years to make a really strong effort to make transit relevant. So again, 7-8 years ago, you were carrying 700 to 800 passengers a day. Now you're down to about 250. And while I'm not an elected official, I work with quite a few different boards and agencies. And I want to get folks to start thinking about this decision will be coming to the city in the next actually earlier than that. Because if you want to start rounding up grants with Metro, with CARB, with Caltrans, that's a multi-year process. So again, kind of the urgency here. And you knew that urgency by requesting this study. Next slide, please. Okay, I've talked quite a bit. Hopefully I've made some sense. I would be happy to answer any questions that council members may have.
All that talking was good, though. I liked it. I don't mind it when you talk a lot and you have a lot of great information. That's great.
Great. I think one of the most important questions is, I mean, we're well aware that the demand for rides has lowered. And so one of the questions that I think we've discussed is downsizing also our fleet as we try to meet the cleaner requirements for vehicles, right? So if we take the opportunity to invest in newer buses, does it make sense to buy smaller fleets, or smaller size fleet? Or maybe we're not driving around a full size bus. Maybe we have something smaller or
You could, but what CARB is doing is, and I don't think anybody from CARB is here, but what's happening with their zero emission vehicle rules is there's basically going to be no place to hide in the next couple of years. So right now, your weight limit for zero emission vehicles is anything over 14,000 pounds gross vehicle weight rating. So these buses that you see up here, they're about 28 or 30,000 pounds. So they fall under the CARB rule. But CARB is, so if you replace that with smaller buses, you would still be impacted by the CARB rule. And there are CARB rules that are impacting the city as well. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. In the next couple of years, you're going to be required to be purchasing ZEV, a certain percentage of ZEV vehicles for your city fleet. And they keep reducing that weight size. So it doesn't impact emergency service vehicles, but, and I think most of your services are contracted, trash and everything else. But if you've got any dump trucks, anything like that, as the years go by, as you replace those will be impacted by ZEV rules as well. So if you decided to run smaller vehicles in the next couple of years, you're going to be impacted by that as well.
So basically what you're saying is that in 3 or 4 years, we're gonna have to switch over to zero emission vehicles, correct?
Correct.
Now, do the micro transit buses that you showed there, would we be able to get a fleet of those in zero emission, and would that qualify?
Well, both, because right now, if you went out the slide that I showed you, those are basically small dial-a-ride vehicles built on Ford Transits. That's the name of the vehicles. Those are about 7,000 pounds, and currently they're not impacted by CARB zero emission rules. They will be in the next few years, but you can get an electric vehicle of that. You can get an electric version of that as well.
Got it. Thank you.
And I just want to chime in and say that we can get about 4 to 5 electric vehicles of that size compared to one
Okay.
electric bus.
Do you know what the cost more or less of those smaller ones are?
Around
Electric ones?
anywhere between 180 and 250.
One, I'm sorry?
About 180K to 250,
Okay.
anywhere in that range.
Because we're gonna have to replace them 3 to 4 years from now regardless, right? The ones we have now.
We would be able to obtain grants, like he mentioned, apply for grants to be able to purchase a fleet of those microtransit vehicles that are electric?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so we're looking into grants. We're working with one grant right now that we have received, and that is going to be our first all electric shuttle bus like the one you've seen.
And how many do you estimate we will need? How many of those?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our goal is going to be to double our ridership within the next couple of years. So depending on how successful we are with that, we can, have more vehicles, more buses or shuttles. But it all is going to depend on budget and
But let's say to start off, how many do you estimate we would need? Of course, if the ridership goes up, we would need to purchase more, but to start off, how many do you think?
so
we would
we're
need?
going to start off with one very soon,
Okay.
and hopefully we can ramp that up to 4.
Okay, start with 1 and go up to 4.
Of the smaller vehicles, correct?
Yes.
And how many passengers can ride in one of those micro buses or shuttles?
8 to 9.
8 to 9?
Yes.
Those like the large vans, is that what it looked like, right? Those big
Like a
vans?
Sprint.
Yes, and the slide that I showed, that's about the size of the vehicles that Metro Micro is running.
Okay.
Similar services, City of San Gabriel has what they call Go San Gabriel. Again, same thing.
Something, sorry, go ahead.
And they are handicap accessible for,
Yes, they are.
perfect. Thank you.
And something very important you mentioned is they would be free to seniors because we have heard a lot about seniors not being able to pay the fees, even though it's low, it is difficult for them. I like the fact that it would be free to seniors and to disabled, that we can look into all of that. So I like all of that. And you mentioned Olive Middle School. Is there a reason why specifically you picked Olive Middle School right there?
So what we looked at was, and you'll see this in the final report, you'll see maps that show graphically where passengers got boarded and alighted the bus at every single bus stop. And the more passengers, the larger the dot is. So very quickly you can see where there's activity in the community and where there's not. So if you're down by Walmart or Target in the south end of the city, you're going to see more large dots. If you're in the northwest corner of the city, you're going to see virtually nothing. So what the buses do now is they go up to Live Oak and they go to the west end of the city where the commercial and industrial part is on River Grade. And it's a wasteland out there. They're not carrying any passengers. So the recommendation, there are a couple route recommendations. One is instead of serving River Grade and commercial is come across, see if I can remember my geography here. Come west across Olive, serve Olive Middle School, and then drop down, I think it's Center, back down to Los Angeles. And you're in a residential area and your intermediate school kids, they're a really good passenger generator, especially if we start the Go Pass program. We should be able to get quite a few students off of that area. But again, the area serving the commercial Northwest is just not generating any passengers. The other recommendation, if I may, was to make the focal point of the service Not Metrolink. That's where the buses lay over, you know, the end of the route, they stay there for a couple minutes. Move that over to Morgan Park because that's really more of the center of, that's where should be a layover point and there's more activity.
Okay, and you said you presented this to the school district as well? And
Yes.
We had a presentation by Metro of the Go Pass program. And if council would like, we can share with you that presentation. It's pretty comprehensive. And the program has gone throughout LA County. They have, I want to say 27 different school districts. That's just school districts. That's not including charters or community colleges. And it's really done a great job on generating significantly increased youth ridership. And there's studies that show, you know, just the positives on there. When you take the cost of transportation out from students' budget, so to speak, you get better attendance and you get a lot of positive outcomes out of that. So they were very enthusiastic about that. So they're aware of that. They're also aware of the potential cost of that. Realistically, you would probably be looking at FY 2026. You know, you're going to need at least 6 or 9 months. And again, it's to get buy-in because that 69,000 or 59,000, while it might not seem like a large number, we know how agencies work.
one thing I would also like maybe to look at, Sam, I don't know if it's possible, the stop areas and the pickup areas. I know after school sports, the kids that stay for after school sports, they all walk home. And a lot of them, for example, Sierra Vista High School, the ones that live over the bridge, there's a lot of kids, they walk home. The one from Baldwin Park High School that they live over here by Olive, they walk home after if they don't have a ride. So maybe look into making sure the routes go around the areas, around the times that students are off of their sports. That would be something to discuss with the school district. And maybe they can make more use of that ridership if we do follow up with that. Because there is a lot of kids that have to walk home after their sports.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great suggestion. We'll take a look at that.
As you went into the history of, you know, the beginning of the transit program in the city, we had wanted to look at some of the perhaps early drivers for why we put the transit system in the first place. And I thought for a moment perhaps there was a legal requirement that we, the city, provide public transit, you know, just out of instinctive understanding of what public service must entail. But it's not required. Our law firm did the research that we're not required to have a transit system. However, to be able to utilize the grant funding that we currently use, we have to provide the public transit service. And, you know, I'll try not to attach myself to any nostalgic feelings here because I just happen to love the express trolley. You know, every time I see it in the city, no matter if it's right and empty, I try not to look inside. I just look, you know, at the contours of the bus. But to the extent that, you know, we use the guiding principles here of this re-engineering of the system, or as Sam calls it, the reimagining of the system. And one of them is the cost of the system as it stands right now. To the extent that it's fully funded by grants, and to the extent that it no longer was able to be sustained by grant funding only, that's why we had to pare down its service. We still have that global consideration of total grant funding. And while increasing the number of passengers will decrease the cost per passenger per ride, it doesn't necessarily equate to more funding. So we would still be limited if we're going to have it only be grant funded. We would still be limited by the total global funding that we currently have, to the extent that it stays the way it is right now, which is around 2 million. So that has to be one of our guiding principles as well. Because, yeah, we can probably, I know some folks have said, well, why don't you make a run over to the West Covina Mall? Which, yeah, it would provide more utility to folks who need to get over there. But does that help Or at least, does that reduce our cost? It may not. So it's important to consider all those factors. And so, you know, the microtransit, which by the way, Metro already runs some routes here in Baldwin Park. We came to know that Metro is running microtransit in Baldwin Park for a good sections of the city, and some of our seniors are actually using it, microtransit. So that seems to be a good pivot in managing the cost and still providing the utility that we believe this system must provide, knowing that it's not legally required. Take the express line as an example. That was premised on providing a connection for Metrolink riders between here and Kaiser. 6,000 people work at Kaiser. You would think that there would be more riders, but they're not using it. And, you know, I don't know. I rode Metrolink for 30 some years, so I don't know why, but they don't.
If I can make a comment or two, we've been given budget numbers to work with in the final report. So you'll see that when you see this report in the next week or two. That will stay within funding limits, number one. We did talk to Kaiser several times. To be honest, got at best moderate feedback from them. We looked at Foothill Transit, which runs service 7 days a week by Kaiser, and they pick up less than 40 people a day at the bus stop. So you would think that that would be a major passenger generator. But what's interesting is when you go to the Metrolink, I hung out at the Metrolink station 2 months ago for a couple mornings and a couple afternoons. And every about 45 minutes, a van comes from City of Hope. And they fill up with folks. And I went up and talked to the bus driver and I said, is this open to, patients going? And he said, no, it's just for employees. But they're doing a lot more in ridership to City of Hope with their own van than the folks at Kaiser. And that's why the recommendation was, instead of just operating a bus that goes back and forth between Metrolink and Kaiser, is if you had a microtransit vehicle that people could schedule to go to workplaces from the Metrolink station, you could expand that quite a bit, because you all know what the major employment centers are in the city. You've got Kaiser, followed by UPS, the supermarket on Ramona is one of the top 5. I mean, you've got quite a few large employment centers, and we feel that that microtransit service replacing the beautiful express bus could be a little bit more open up that service. And especially with Metrolink increasing service, like I said, every hour you're going to start seeing that next month. And I don't know if Metrolink's let you guys know about that, but some good opportunities for the city and the riders.
This is our city.
Yeah, and also to the CEO's point, the changes we made that the council approved in March to make some of the reductions, which were precisely, based on the global budget, and so we're expecting to have some savings where we don't have any now, but next year, based on what we've done so far, it is going towards that. But whatever direction we take and whatever reimagining of the transit operates, we're targeting around 1.7, which we can definitely 1.7 million to build something within that budget so that we can be within a comfortable limit of expenditures, and while having reserves that we can carry over year over year.
And do any of you have any similar nostalgic feelings about the trolley? I mean, one of the recommendations is that we stop the express service and replace it with microtransit, correct?
Yes.
So those trolley buses will go away, but we would keep them still for certain special events and the like, right? But they would go away from the city landscape. Are you guys okay with that?
We currently have 2 of those trolleys.
Yes, so we have 2 trolleys and we have 5 of the fixed route buses.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, like you said, we're
So-
gonna still keep them for special events, but I mean, obviously, at this point in time, we just need to make sure that we're making the decision that's gonna be most cost effective. And yeah, so I'm fine with, replacing them with something more cost effective. But it would be good if we can keep them for, as you mentioned, special occasions or even, using them in the annual Christmas parade.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
I know. Yep.
Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to continuing working with the city.
Thank you. And so you'll be seeing the final report, the final draft wrapped up within a week or two.
Mayor. Sorry, over here.
Yeah.
Just want to make an announcement that Mayor Estrada joined the city council meeting at 5:10 PM and Councilmember Garcia joined the council meeting at 5:45 PM. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, City Clerk. So at this moment, I believe we have concluded our open session. We'll go ahead and recess to closed session, and then we will see everybody back at the 7 o'clock regular meeting.